Hello, everyone.
Good day. We're continuing our Futurology series. We've released several episodes on the channel, and we've gathered the most interesting questions about the future. And the first episode got a pretty mixed reaction, especially the part where you talked about technocracy and commerce. People started asking, but Alexander uses an Apple Watch, probably an iPhone too, drives a car, and yet he criticizes the technocrats who develop and promote all of that. Of course, we offered an alternative view and said that denying reality is pointless. But specifically, what do you suggest people do, given that all this already exists? Many are ready to go to extremes, like rejecting it altogether.
Well, let me turn that question back to you, Nicole. How do you feel about the iPhone, your car, your computer, the internet?
I feel great. I really do. But sure, there's always that little undercurrent, that conspiratorial tone. We all know people say the digital future is inevitable, that governments are forming digital societies designed to control people. And some time ago, Elon Musk and a group of like-minded people signed a statement proposing a pause in the development of artificial intelligence, saying it poses a threat to humanity's future.
And then he immediately launched a company.
Yes. And just a couple of weeks later, there was news that he'd created a new company focused on AI development.
Which is why we need to approach all of this soberly and speak plainly. I like using the iPhone. I like using the internet. I like using a computer. I enjoy watching 8K television in high resolution. And at the same time, I understand that every person adapts to the environment they live in. That's the best option we have. We can survive under any conditions. If it's cold, our immune system adjusts to handle the cold. If it's extremely hot, we adapt to the heat. And after a while, a person who's used to heat finds cold unbearable, and someone who's lived in a cold climate for years gets exhausted the moment they land somewhere hot like Africa. So we'll be adapting again. That's just how it works. On one hand, yes, we need to use the tools that are already available, but we also need to understand that nothing on planet Earth was invented by us. None of it. There are energy informational layers we tap into. And in doing so, we pay a certain price, also energetic and informational. And depending on which egregor we connect to and what source we're drawing energy and information from, that's where our dependency lies. But if we don't associate ourselves with being a technocrat, or a poet, or a painter, or a doctor, or a scientist, if we stay open, then change happens harmoniously. In that case, all the energy informational flows that come to us will be used efficiently, but only if we put the planet first, if we put man and woman first, everything else second. The problem is we usually go to extremes, and when we get the opportunity to do something, we start doing it excessively. It's like when Khrushchev saw that corn grows well and decided the whole Soviet Union should grow only corn. Sure, in some regions, corn is genuinely useful, but when the entire country switches to it, well, let's just say things get out of balance. Same here. If we now digitize ourselves completely and dive too deep into digital technologies, we'll start to degrade, because we'll be handing over most of what we used to do to artificial intelligence, to computers, to electric grids and transportation. And at some point, their logic will start to dictate how we live. Because if we want something and the technology can't do it the way we want, we'll end up doing what it allows us to do. And so we become dependent on something we created ourselves, and now we're trapped in it.
So if the physical world starts to get more restricted, people will shift into the digital one, where it might feel like the boundaries are wider, but in reality, it's still designed around the interests of specific people, right?
I'd say we need to develop other directions in parallel.
Like what?
I've asked myself the same thing. How do we stay human and not end up becoming cyborgs? Because right now, we're sprinting in that direction, and we need to understand. We can't keep artificially triggering serotonin and dopamine forever. At some point, they'll stop being released and we'll start walking around like zombies, just mechanically performing tasks. I've noticed something interesting. People send me drawings made by girls and guys, and drawings made by artificial intelligence. I can tell the difference instantly. AI-generated images still look like they were made by a robot. But when a person, a real personality, creates something, you can feel it. And that's why I believe we need to develop sensitivity.
Sure. That might be obvious to you, but there are a lot of people reading news articles written by bots, GPT, and so on, looking at AI-generated images, getting logos made with AI, and they can't tell the difference. They don't even care who made it. And for them, that's normal.
Let's start with the obvious. It's a lie. Artificial intelligence doesn't actually create anything. It just reorganizes what was already created by humans. Here's the trick. It collects all the texts ever written by people, analyzes them, and under a given prompt, reshapes them into new sentences. Same with images. We have to understand that everything starts with humans. Then AI tries to optimize what already exists based on algorithms people wrote. But if you give it a blank sheet of paper and ask it to create something purely from that blankness, it won't generate anything. It's no one. It's empty. That's it.
So in this context, how is human creativity different from artificial intelligence? Does a person simply have no defined limits?
I'd say that artificial intelligence is still more efficient than a human, maybe 1,000 times more. But you have to realize it works with fragments created by human beings, and those people were connected to energy informational layers that exist beyond planet Earth. So yes, it has a trace of life in it, like homeopathy, because the original fragments were created by someone alive. But when we see a person creating something or a group of people, the energy multiplies. With AI, it just pulls fragments from different sources and connects them. And since the one doing the connecting isn't a human, but artificial intelligence, the energy drops. The perception drops. If a person operates from the noosphere, meaning they don't drop below the head-on, or metaphorically speaking, they're not thinking from the past.
From experience.
I wanted to use a harsher word like thinking with your ass, meaning you're operating from what's already been digested and turned into compost. Then, of course, you're going to pull from old material. And we have to face the fact that when we push people into correctness instead of feeling, we lose something. On one hand, it helps. Structure is important. In tech, in development, in systems, it's essential. Otherwise, there's chaos. But we must always integrate feeling. If you eat spoonfuls of salt, let's say salt is feeling, it's awful. But if you add just the right amount to porridge, it becomes delicious. Same with structure. We can systematize everything, but if we don't develop the ability to feel, we won't be able to use it.
So instead of access to unlimited data like artificial intelligence has, we as humans have something else, a sensory mechanism, feeling, which means at the right moment we're able to come up with the best possible solution, not by using past experience, but by staying in creative energy and perceiving the world through our human qualities. At the same time, the performance and power of AI really can become a threat. And that's what many people fear, that it will start replacing jobs. And to some extent, that's already happening, with copywriting, for example. How real is that threat from your perspective, and how do you see it developing?
The threat only arises from people. It's simple. If we use a computer for what it's meant for, that's great. But if we start using it to hammer nails, not so great. Same with AI. In my opinion, we absolutely need to move as much as possible toward a technical level of creation. Like we build 3D machines, we set up systems where, under the guidance of humans, fields are planted and crops are grown, and control is handled by machines, but only under the supervision of people who remain in the sensory field. The key point is this: when people are freed up, when machines take over their jobs, then part of that machine's benefit, what I'd call dividends, must be passed on to the person whose job was replaced. So if we shift everything toward high-level technical development, and at the same time give people the opportunity to live creatively, to develop their sensitivity, and pay them for the fact that their job has been taken over, then that's a balanced system. The real problem lies with those who build or buy technical systems with the goal of minimizing costs and maximizing profits. But if we reframe that logic and treat it like a value-added tax, say 20%, we remove that tax and instead turn it into a benefit for people. So every person receives 20% from the technical resource that replaced their labor.
Doesn't that start to look like the same model we already have, where the state supports huge waves of immigrants? Isn't it the same thing?
It is the same thing. And the key factor is how we structure what people do with their free time. Because if you take immigrants from Africa, give them benefits, and they stay within the worldview they came with, then in this technocratic society, they'll start to degrade. They'll begin, figuratively speaking, to break the very systems we've built. So we need structure.
That sounds a bit racist.
Maybe. But the principle is simple. If there's no education, no purpose in life, no curiosity, no understanding of how the world works, no positive experiences, then what do you get? People become like a cancer within society. And yes, that's true, but those same people can still be valuable, both for themselves and for society, if we show them the path forward. Still, alongside that, we'll have to change everything, starting with how we give birth to children. The state we're in, our mood, our perception of life, our values, then how we raise them from early childhood, how we educate them in schools and universities. That's how society changes. And through that, we'll absolutely avoid future epidemics, wars, and global catastrophes on planet Earth, because at the root of everything is the human sensory level. And if that level is suppressed, we may still do things correctly from a technical perspective. But anything technically correct that's disconnected from feeling will create imbalance. And that imbalance is eventually corrected through catastrophe, economic collapse, conflict, destruction.
It sounds very idealistic, in a good way. So basically, artificial intelligence itself isn't dangerous to people. It might even be helpful. But what's dangerous is the person or the corporation, the same merchant you talked about in the first episode. Who stands behind the AI?
You have to understand, those people act out of weakness because the real source of energy, happiness, and joy is interest. When you do something meaningful and then share it with others. The same principle always works. Do good things and it will return to you many times over. And if someone does unkind things, then unkind things will return to them. Also multiplied. Yes, they'll get empty bank accounts, maybe with lots of zeros, and the empty energy of paper money, if that still exists. But they won't receive what matters most, the feeling of happiness. And happiness only comes during creation, during growth, during meaningful engagement, and through the exchange of energy with those who truly enjoy what you've brought into the world.